firebombs, swingers, and disappearing land. No, this isn't the latest Netflix thriller. These are actual property investing horror stories I've encountered in the last several years as a buyer's agent and commercial valuer. These deals went so far off the rails, they ended up in a ditch. Thankfully though, each one of these disasters was avoided thanks to some good old-fashioned due diligence. And when it comes to due diligence, you don't have to have a PhD in property to do it right. There are just a few key things to look out for that can save you from a world of hurt and a ton of cash. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 3 deals that went to absolute and how due diligence was able to avoid an absolute when investing in property. We'll go through how a proposed street widening project nearly cost the client a fortune in North Brisbane, why a swingers club tenant forced us to abandon an otherwise attractive deal in Perth, and how a firebombed vape shop in Noosa exposed the risks of buying without proper investigation. Let's get straight into it. The first deal we want to touch on was a situation where our client had found the property on their own and they wanted us to do a once-over and check that everything was above board before they purchased the property. At first glance, the property did seem promising. It had great development potential, a massive frontage, and with the Olympics coming to Brisbane, ticked a lot of boxes. But when we looked into the zoning and had a chat with the local council, we found a major issue. There was a development application or a DA in force to widen the street. This would have shortened and reduced the frontages and the setbacks, making the block and land allotment smaller. This change would affect everything: the developability, the legal requirements, and what could actually be done with the block. After investigating further and seeing how much they planned to widen the street, what seemed a great buy turned into something you wouldn't touch. Interestingly, when we investigated the dates of the DA and when this process started, it became clear that the vendor knew about it, which is highly likely why they were selling. This selling agent would have also known, and this was part of their own due diligence process for the vendor. Our client had been considering putting some residential units on the block with a shop underneath, as it was a mixed use at the time. But with the reduced land size, the parking requirements couldn't be met, and there was a host of other issues that made the original plan unfeasible for them. To uncover this information, we got involved with the council websites, spoke directly with the town planner. Most councils have come a long way in making information accessible online, but never discount the human touch. In this case, we got through the council very, very quickly, and the town planner was forthcoming with key information and advice. When I explained what our client was looking to do, the planner was honest and said, "No, I don't think that's going to work." We could have submitted a proposal, but it would have been very expensive, especially given our limited time frames for getting the deal over the line and settlement dates were approaching. And even then, there was no guarantee of a yes or a no. There were a lot of moving parts to this deal, and in the end, it just wasn't going to be feasible or happened, and it was too expensive and too uncertain. I'd say the key takeaways from this deal are: check council websites and look online for specific council. This will typically bring up all the development applications applicable. Talk to a town planner, either the resident planners at the council or engage in your own private planner. They can provide invaluable information and insights. Don't forget, do a thorough Google search to uncover any long-term plans, say like a 10, 15 or a 20-year infrastructure project that could impact the property. We also really like talking to private town planners because most of the time they'll go above and beyond. They'll play devil's advocate and see opportunities where the council may be more black and white. The second deal is a little bit juicier than this because a swingers club was involved. This property was out in Western Australia. We knew the area well, having purchased just 2 doors down in the same block for another client. This deal had fantastic numbers and everything tied up nicely. So we thought, great, let's get another one here for a separate client. We sent a building inspector out to run through things just as we'd done a few months earlier for the other property. There was a bit of discussion about whether we needed to send him out again, but we insisted it's always best to protect the client's interest and check if anything had changed in the common areas. So our inspector goes through the property, taking in-depth photos. The property itself was a fairly new construction and it seemed to be in good shape. But when the photos came back, we saw some unusual things. There was a photo of a shower, the pool table, an upstairs mezzanine level. For those who aren't familiar, a mezzanine is like a second floor with a high ceiling space area. And in this case, the mezzanine had been constructed to include several bedrooms, if you catch my drift. Downstairs at the rear of the property, underneath the mezzanine, there were bar fridges, a bar, lounges, and on the bar a couple of bowls. Some were presumably for car keys, if you're old enough to remember that practice, and the others were full of prophylactics, and I'm sure you can put two and two together here. Now, we're not here to pass moral judgment. As long as what a tenant is doing is not illegal, it doesn't really affect our process. The issue, however, in this case was the property wasn't zoned for that type of use, and it came under the banner of clubs and adult entertainment, which wasn't permitted in this particular part of the industrial area. So we raised this with the vendor's agent, making it clear that we weren't personally fussed about it, but we didn't see how it would be approved if the council found out. The agent's response was basically, don't worry about it, you can get an exemption or just get it rezoned. But rezoning costs money and it takes time, which we didn't have. We were under contract, remember, with a 21-day ticking clock for finance approval. It was a real issue. When we ran the numbers with this new information, it just wasn't going to stack up. What was going on wasn't technically allowable, and the process of making it legal was going to be expensive for our client. It was a shame because as a purchase, it was fantastic. The cap rate was a real catch because it was at least 1% better than market rates. We know now that's likely because of the tenant's use. But with the zoning issues and the tight time frame, we just couldn't make it work. The client was very happy we uncovered this though. We had warned them that the finance might not go through, but in the end it was actually the unregistered lease and the unapproved use that killed the deal for them. I should point out that this was a bit of a grey area because it wasn't technically a brothel, it was a swingers club where people were paying for entry to mingle and join up rather than paying for it directly. We've bought warehouses before that were operating as man caves with things like pool tables, pinball machines, and those are all above board. It was the specific adult nature of the club that pushed it into the realm of needing special zoning. Ultimately, the vendor had decided to get the property appropriately zoned for this use. It would likely have flown. But given our tight time frames and the costs involved, we had to walk away from what was otherwise an attractive deal. The last deal I want to share with you is another juicy one. We came across a vape shop that also sold cigarettes and want to say lollies. You know, the kind of place that seems to be looking to get everybody hooked young and early. At first glance, the numbers looked really good. But then my colleague Jeff, who has an uncanny sixth sense about properties, said there was something about this one that rang a bell. So we decided to do a little bit more digging than usual. While Jeff was doing some internet research, we started our usual process of talking with the tenants. We always insist on this, just to see if they're happy, if there are any areas of concern or things they'd like to see changed. After all, you want to keep good tenants in place wherever we can. When we spoke to the vape shop owner, he said, look, it's been a great tenancy and I hope your client decides to keep me on if everything goes smoothly. And then he mentioned that there had been some issues with fire. That caught our attention. When we got our hands on the strata reports and the AGM minutes, we saw that the insurance had gone through the roof. No pun intended. It turns out that someone had an issue with the vape store and decided to firebomb it. Not once, but twice. And this had happened a year or two ago. When we were chatting with the tenant, he mentioned that it had happened at his other store as well, just a few suburbs away. And that sort of got us thinking and set off a few alarm bells. We started making more calls to the other tenants to see what they knew. That's when the whole thing blew up. There were allegations, and I want to stress these were allegations, of the vape store selling some extra items, if you catch my drift. We were led to believe that the two-wheeled motorised cycling fellows, if you know what I mean, have taken an interest in these stores. Maybe things were being delivered and not paid for. I'll let you fill in those blanks. But it was bad enough that we thought, okay, there are going to be some problems here. It took us a while to even get the building and pest inspection done because there was a bit of nervousness around the place. When we did get the photos back and we saw they had prison grade doors behind the front door, if you needed to get in or out in a hurry, no one was doing either, especially if there was a fire. At that point, we realised something else was potentially going on at this establishment. It was just too hard a risk to take for our client. The two main reasons we crashed this deal were: one, the insurance issues because of the firebombing, and two, the potential headache of owning this property long term, given the tenant's alleged extracurricular activities. When we asked the tenant directly if he thought the attacks might happen again, he said, yeah. And we were like, okay, great. Thanks for the honesty, but no thanks. So in the end, we walked away from the deal. As you can see from these case studies, due diligence is absolutely critical when it comes to property investing, especially when you don't know where it will lead. Without it, our clients could have been stuck with property far less than they'd paid, a tenant engaged in suspect, if not illegal activities, or a building that was literally under attack. We actually offer a standalone due diligence service now. So, if you've found a property that you like, but want to look into some things that might not be obvious at first glance, give us a call. We will look into some of the specifics. If you found this video helpful, please leave a thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next video.